"Mademoiselle," said the stranger, "one day you will receive a letter signed Sinbad the Sailor. Do exactly what the letter bids you, however strange it may appear." "Yes, sir," returned Julie. "Do you promise?" "I swear to you I will." "It is well. Adieu, mademoiselle. Continue to be the good, sweet girl you are at present, and I have great hopes that heaven will reward you by giving you Emmanuel for a husband." Julie uttered a faint cry, blushed like a rose, and leaned against the baluster. The stranger waved his hand, and continued to descend. In the court he found Penelon, who, with a rouleau of 100 francs in either hand, seemed unable to make up his mind to retain them. "Come with me, my friend," said the Englishman, "I wish to speak to you." Chapter 30. The 5th of September. The extension provided for by the agent of Thomson and French, at the moment when Morel expected at least, was to the poor shipowner so decided a stroke of good fortune that he almost dared to believe that fate was at length grown weary of wasting her spite upon him. The same day he told his wife, Emmanuel, and his daughter all that had occurred, and a ray of hope, if not of tranquility, returned to the family. Unfortunately, however, Morel had not only engagements with the house of Thomson and French, who had shown themselves so considerate towards him, and, as he had said, in business he had correspondents, and not friends. When he thought the matter over, he could by no means account for this generous conduct on the part of Thomson and French towards him, and could only attribute it to some such selfish argument as this: "We had better help a man who owes us nearly 300,000 francs, and have those 300,000 francs at the end of 3 months than hasten his ruin, and get only 6 or 8% of our money back again." Unfortunately, whether through envy or stupidity, all Morel's correspondents did not take this view, and some even came to a contrary decision. The bills signed by Morel were presented at his office with scrupulous exactitude, and, thanks to the delay granted by the Englishman, were paid by Cockleys with equal punctuality. Cockleys thus remained in his accustomed tranquillity. It was Morel alone who remembered with alarm, that if he had to repay on the 15th the 50,000 francs of M. de Baville, and on the 30th the 32,500 francs of bills, for which, as well as the debt due to the inspector of prisons, he had time granted. He must be a ruined man. The opinion of all the commercial men was that, under the reverses which had successively weighed down Morel, it was impossible for him to remain solvent. Great, therefore, was the astonishment when at the end of the month, he cancelled all his obligations with his usual punctuality. Still confidence was not restored to all minds, and the general opinion was that the complete ruin of the unfortunate shipowner had been postponed only until the end of the month. The month passed, and Morel made extraordinary efforts to get in all his resources. Formerly his paper, at any date, was taken with confidence, and was even in request. Morel now tried to negotiate bills at 90 days only, and none of the banks would give him credit. Fortunately, Morel had some funds coming in on which he could rely, and, as they reached him, he found himself in a condition to meet his engagements when the end of July came. The agent of Thomson and French had not been again seen at Marseille. The day after, or 2 days after his visit to Morel, he had disappeared, and as in that city he had had no intercourse but with the mayor, the inspector of prisons, and M. Morel, his departure left no trace except in the memories of these 3 persons. As to the sailors of the Pharaon, they must have found snug berths elsewhere, for they also had disappeared. Captain Gomard, recovered from his illness, had returned from Palma. He delayed presenting himself at Morel's, but the owner, hearing of his arrival, went to see him. The worthy shipowner knew, from Penelon's recital, of the captain's brave conduct during the storm, and tried to console him. He brought him also the amount of his wages, which Captain Gomard had not dared to apply for. As he descended the staircase, Morel met Penelon, who was going up. Penelon had, it would seem, made good use of his money, for he was newly clad. When he saw his employer, the worthy tar seemed much embarrassed, drew on one side into the corner of the landing place, passed his quid from one cheek to the other, stared stupidly with his great eyes, and only acknowledged the squeeze of the hand which Morel as usual gave him by a slight pressure in return. Morel attributed Penelon's embarrassment to the elegance of his attire. It was evident the good fellow had not gone to such an expense on his own account. He was, no doubt, engaged on board some other vessel, and thus his bashfulness arose from the fact of his not having, if we may so express ourselves, worn mourning for the Pharaon longer. Perhaps he had come to tell Captain Gomard of his good luck, and to offer him employment from his new master. "Worthy fellows," said Morel, as he went away, "may your new master love you as I loved you, and be more fortunate than I have been." August rolled by in unceasing efforts on the part of Morel to renew his credit or revive the old. On the 20th of August it was known at Marseille that he had left town in the mail coach, and then it was said that the bills would go to protest at the end of the month, and that Morel had gone away and left his chief clerk Emmanuel, and his cashier Cochleys, to meet the creditors. But, contrary to all expectation, when the 31st of August came, the house opened as usual, and Cochleys appeared behind the grating of the counter, examined all bills presented with the usual scrutiny, and, from first to last, paid all with the usual precision. There came in, moreover, 2 drafts which M. Morel had fully anticipated, and which Cochleys paid as punctually as the bills which the shipowner had accepted. All this was incomprehensible, and then, with the tenacity peculiar to prophets of bad news, the failure was put off until the end of September. On the 1st, Morel returned. He was awaited by his family with extreme anxiety, for from this journey to Paris they hoped great things. Morel had thought of Danglars, who was now immensely rich, and had lain under great obligations to Morel in former days, since to him it was owing that Danglars entered the service of the Spanish banker, with whom he had laid the foundations of his vast wealth. It was said at this moment that Danglars was worth from 6 to 8 millions of francs, and had unlimited credit. Danglars, then, without taking a crown from his pocket, could save Morel. He had but to pass his word for a loan, and Morel was saved. Morel had long thought of Danglars, but had kept away from some instinctive motive, and had delayed as long as possible availing himself of this last resource. And Morel was right, for he returned home crushed by the humiliation of a refusal. Yet, on his arrival, Morel did not utter a complaint, or say one harsh word. He embraced his weeping wife and daughter, pressed Emmanuel's hand with friendly warmth, and then going to his private room on the second floor had sent for Cocles. Then, said the two women to Emmanuel, we are indeed ruined. It was agreed in a brief council held among them, that Julie should write to her brother, who was in garrison at Nîmes, to come to them as speedily as possible. The poor women felt instinctively that they required all their strength to support the blow that impended. Besides, Maximilien Morel, though hardly 22, had great influence over his father. He was a strong-minded, upright young man. At the time when he decided on his profession, his father had no desire to choose for him, but had consulted young Maximilien's taste. He had at once declared for a military life, and had in consequence studied hard, passed brilliantly through the Polytechnic School, and left it as sub-lieutenant of the 53d of the line. For a year he had held this rank, and expected promotion on the first vacancy. In his regiment, Maximilien Morel was noted for his rigid observance, not only of the obligations imposed on a soldier, but also of the duties of a man, and he thus gained the name of the Stoic.